The first thing Claire Monroe noticed every morning was the smell: bleach coffee and rain. The hospital had its own weather, and it clung to Cascade Memorial like a second skin. Outside Seattle pressed a gray forehead against the high windows, drizzle streaking down the glass in tired lines. Inside the fluorescent lights hummed quietly, never quite matching the rhythm of the heart monitors. Claire stepped out of the staff locker room with her scrubs already smoothed, her dark hair pulled into a neat knot at the nape of her neck. Her badge swung lightly against her chest. Claire Monroe, registered, Nurse Emergency Department. The letters were crisp and new. They still felt like they belonged to someone else. She crossed the hallway with the careful pace of someone trying not to take up space. Her shoes made almost no sound against the waxed floor. Nurses passed her in clumps, moving fast, holding coffee, talking over one another about admissions overnight, disasters, kids at home. No one met her eyes. She was invisible in plain sight. She slipped into the break room, a narrow box with a coffee machine that growled like an old dog. A news channel flickered soundlessly on the mounted television. A grainy shot of a desert skyline filled the screen, then a military helicopter banking low over the sand. The rotor blades blurred into a dark halo. Claire froze for half a heartbeat, one hand still on the cupboard handle. The picture on the TV jumped to a talking head in a studio. By the time she blinked, the helicopter was gone. She inhaled slowly, air tasting of burned coffee and disinfectant, then reached up for a stack of cups as if nothing had happened. "Monroe, you planning to marry that cabinet or what?" The voice snapped across the room like a rubber band. Claire turned. Jenna Sparks, ER nurse, 15 years in. Ponytail, heavy eyeliner badge, decorated with stickers that did not match the lines around her eyes. She held a plastic mug in one hand and her phone in the other. Claire let go of the handle and stepped aside. "Sorry. Just so you know," Jenna said, squeezing past her, "we call it a morning shift, not a meditation retreat." Another nurse at the table hid a smirk behind her cup. Claire poured coffee into a paper cup, the dark stream shaking slightly at the brim. She pretended not to hear. Pretending was easy. It was the one skill no one could see. On the TV behind them, the silent anchor pointed at a map. A thin banner at the bottom mentioned a training accident at a base overseas. Claire did not look up again. The overhead announcement system clicked with a soft chime. "Dr. Klein to triage. Dr. Klein to triage." Dr. Adrian Klein appeared in the doorway a moment later, still tucking his shirt into his scrub pants. Gray hair, uncombed clipboard already in hand. He nodded at the room in a vague, distracted way that somehow landed nowhere and everywhere at once. His gaze brushed over Claire's face as if skimming a page. She dipped her head in a small nod reflexive, but his attention had already moved on. "Morning, Jenna. How many bodies did they dump on us?" "4 in the waiting room, 3 in fast track, 2 in hall beds." Jenna sipped her coffee. "And a brand new baby nurse hiding by the cabinet." Dr. Klein glanced at Claire again, this time with a flicker of recognition. He squinted at her badge. "Monroe, right?" "Yes, sir." "You started this week." "3rd day." He hummed like that was information of limited use. "Stay with Sparks. She knows the ropes." It was not quite a compliment. "Come on, rookie." Jenna dumped her cup in the trash and jerked her head toward the door. "Time to meet your kingdom." Claire followed her into the main artery of the emergency department. The ER was already awake. Monitors chirped, IV pumps clicked, phones rang. A child cried somewhere out of sight. Curtains swayed as staff moved in and out of bays, the fabric brushing softly against metal rails. A paramedic crew rolled a stretcher past them, the wheels rattling over a crack in the floor. Jenna walked fast, talking over her shoulder. "Restock meds in carts 5 and 6. Saline in the supply room is a mess, you fix that. Charts go on the left side of the station, not the right. I don't care what they taught you in school. This is how we do it here." "Yes," Claire said. She did not say that they had once taught her how to work in 12 inches of space in the back of a moving vehicle, or in the dirt under tracer fire, or that chaos obeyed the same rules no matter where it lived. At the supply room, Jenna shoved the door open with her hip. Inside, shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, stacked with saline bags, tubing dressings, gloves. The air smelled of plastic and paper and that faint powdery scent of latex. "You get to babysit this closet," Jenna said. "Lucky you." She pointed at a lower shelf. "Some genius last night stacked the 1-liter saline on top of the half-liters. So when we grab one, the other falls. Fix it, and don't take an hour. We run a hospital, not a monastery." She left with a rustle of scrubs. Claire stood alone in the narrow room for a moment, feeling the echo of the door closing settle in her ribs. Then she crouched in front of the shelves. The boxes were indeed stacked wrong, heavy over light. She slid the top boxes down one at a time. Cardboard rasped against cardboard. Her movements were efficient, economical. She did not think of them as anything else. One box slipped as she turned, Instinct kicked in before thought. Her hand shot out, catching the edge before it could fall. She rotated her wrist, absorbing the weight with her forearm, guiding the box back into a safe slot with a smooth, practiced motion. A trickle of cold sensation ran along the back of her neck. Her body knew that move. It came from years of grabbing slipping stretchers, falling packs people. She sat back on her heels, breathing a little too fast for such a small thing. The supply room hummed quietly. Somewhere just outside, someone laughed at a joke, loud enough to carry through the wall. Claire straightened the last row of bags and stood up. When she opened the door, the main hall of the ER swallowed her again. A patient in a wheelchair rolled past blanket up to his chin. A volunteer pushed a mop along the floor, leaving behind a faint chemical shine. At the nurse's station, Jenna sat on a tall stool, scrolling through the computer. She glanced up as Claire approached. "Done already?" "Yes. We will see if it stays that way after the first rush." She turned her attention back to the screen, as if Claire had vanished. Claire stepped to the side, out of the main stream of traffic. Her fingers found the edge of her badge, rubbing over the raised letters. "Registered nurse." She let her hand drop. The overhead speakers crackled again, a different tone this time, higher, sharper. A brief pause, as if the whole department inhaled together. Claire looked up. The chime finished with a sharp little beep, then the intercom came alive. "Code Blue Trauma Bay 3. Repeat, Code Blue Trauma Bay 3. All at once, the hallway lifted around her. Chairs scraped, carts rolled, voices rose at the same time. "That is us," Jenna said, already off the stool. She brushed past Claire and broke into a fast walk that was almost a run. Another nurse joined her. Someone grabbed the crash cart, the wheels squealing as it pivoted out of its slot and barreled down the corridor. For a heartbeat, Claire did not move. The words hung in the air, heavy. "Code Blue." Her chest tightened. Her fingers curled around the edge of the counter as setter. Then her body stepped forward before her mind caught up, feet falling in behind the others, drawn in the wake of urgency and fear. Trauma Bay 3 sat halfway down the main line curtain, already flung wide. Inside, the world had been stripped down to white light metal edges and a man on a gurney whose chest had forgotten how to rise. He was in his 50s, maybe. Jaw slack skin, the color of candle wax. Electrodes dotted his bare chest. The monitor at his side showed a flat green line. The room was full and empty at the same time. People packed themselves around the bed, yet no one seemed to touch anything that mattered. "Where is the epi?" "I thought it was in the cart." "Who called it in?" "Is there a doctor here?" Claire slid in near the door, her back brushing the edge of the curtain. The smell hit first. Sweat antiseptic and a metallic edge of panic. She watched Jenna move to the head of the bed, trying to tilt the man's chin back. Another nurse fumbled with the defibrillator hands, shaking against the plastic casing. "Start compressions," someone said. "No, we need to shock first." Not without rhythm. Voices piled on top of one another. The flat line on the monitor did not care. Claire's gaze dropped to the crash cart. Her vision narrowed. Oxygen tubing, syringes, vials, the bottom drawer where the emergency meds lived. Her ears did something strange. The noise in the room faded to a dull roar. In its place came a slower, steadier sound, a remembered rhythm, a heart under her palms, firm then fading. The distant chop of air from somewhere above, and the static of a radio that did not answer. Her feet moved. She stepped away from the curtain and toward the cart. "Monroe, what are you doing?" Jenna snapped. Claire did not answer. Her hand closed on the drawer handle. Metal scraped open. Clear plastic vials gleamed under the light. She took one and turned the label already read without looking. 2 milligrams epinephrine, she said. Her voice did not sound like it belonged to the same woman who had whispered apologies in the break room. It came out clear-clipped, each word cut to size. Heads turned. "Who said that?" one of the nurses muttered. Claire did not wait. She set the vial on the tray and moved to the side of the bed. "We need compressions now. Hard and fast. I will do it." Her hands found their place on the man's chest as if they had always known it. Heel of one hand on the sternum, other hand on top arms, straight. She pushed. The first compression sank deep into the ribs, meeting resistance and something like stubbornness. She counted in her head, not with numbers, but with an old cadence. 1, 2, 3, 4? Her shoulders fell into a rhythm. Her knees bent slightly with each push. The monitor still showed a flat line, but the man's body no longer lay lifeless. It moved under her force, chest pumping under unseen command. "Who do you think you are, Monroe?" Jenna said, too loud, too desperate. "Move, you are going to break his ribs." "If his heart does not start, his ribs do not matter," Claire said. She did not raise her voice yet. The words cut clean through the room. No one spoke over her. A pair of hands appeared at her side, gloved. Dr. Klein breath, already short from the hurry, eyes wide and a little wild. "What have we got?" "Cardiac arrest, unknown onset." Claire answered between compressions, lungs pulling for air without losing the beat. No spontaneous respirations, no pulse. I have started high-quality CPR, 2 milligrams epinephrine ready, defibrillator charging to 200 joules. Klein blinked as if someone had splashed water in his face. That is advanced protocol, he said. Do you want to wait or do you want him back? She said. He looked at her, really looked for the first time since she started at Cascade. Fine, push the epi. A nurse seized the vial hands steadier now that someone had given an order that sounded like it belonged. The medication slid into the man's vein. The defibrillator hummed as it built its charge, a low, rising whine that ran along Claire's spine. She kept pressing. Sweat gathered at the back of her neck, her arms burned. Her breath shortened, but the count in her head did not falter. 1, 2, 3, 4. The machine beeped ready. Charged, the nurse said. Everyone clear, Claire said. No, I should run the shock, Jenna started. Claire lifted her hands in one clean motion, stepping back just enough to clear the bed. She did not look at Jenna. Clear, she repeated. Dr. Klein took the paddles and pressed them to the man's chest. Gel smeared under the metal. The air in the room tightened. Shock delivered, he said. The man's body jerked. His heels left the mattress for an instant, then dropped. The monitor line jumped, then fell flat again. Silence. The silence was worse than the noise. It had weight. Claire moved back into position before anyone could say a word. Her hands found the sternum again and began to press. Continue compressions, she said. Check rhythm in 2 minutes. This time no one argued. The seconds pulled long. Sweat slid down Claire's temple. Her arms trembled but held. She was aware of everything and nothing. The smell, the light, the rasp of fabric, the corner of the monitor in her peripheral vision. 1, 2, 3, 4. Beep! It was soft, a single note in the middle of her count. Then another. Then a run of them, irregular at first, then pulling into a staggered rhythm. The flat line on the screen broke into peaks and valleys. Sinus rhythm, someone breathed. Dr. Klein leaned in fingers against the man's neck. Faint pulse, he said. But it is there. Claire eased off the chest. The world rushed back in around her. Voices, the hiss of oxygen, the slap of someone adjusting a blood pressure cuff. Her heart pounded against her ribs in a way that felt sudden, as if it had been holding still, too. Start fluids, Klein said. Get a pressure. Call cardiology. Tell them we have a resuscitated arrest for them. He looked over the bed at Claire. His eyes were different now. Sharper. Curious. You said you just had training, he said. She stripped her gloves off slowly, careful not to snap them, careful not to let her hands shake. Yes, sir, she said. Where? He asked. Different places, she said, barely above the noise. He held her gaze a second longer than he had in the break room, then nodded once. Good work, he said, already turning back to the patient. The words did not feel like they belonged to her either. Jenna blocked her path to the doorway. Her face had lost some of its color. You got lucky, Jenna said. Her voice sounded stiff, like someone reading from the wrong page. Do not think this means you can start barking orders every time. Claire met her eyes. There was no heat in her gaze, only a tired sort of clarity. I did not bark, she said. I just spoke loud enough to hear. For a moment, Jenna looked like she might spit back something sharp. Instead, her mouth closed. She stepped aside. The curtain swayed softly as Claire exited the bay. The hallway outside felt too bright after the concentrated glare of the trauma room. She moved past a cluster of gurneys, past a mother, soothing a crying toddler, past an old man staring at his hands. Her palms stung. She flexed her fingers, feeling blood flow back into them. The memory of bone under skin sat under her touch like a bruise that would not fade. She found the supply room and slipped inside, letting the door click shut behind her. The humming quiet wrapped around her shoulders. She leaned back against the wall for a moment, eyes closed. Her pulse slowly climbed down from the high edge. On the other side of the wall, footsteps went by. A distant cart rattled. Somewhere closer, a television in another room spoke over the noise of the ER. She heard it through the thin drywall, a familiar thrum in the background of some news story. Not a siren, not a monitor. The distorted chop of rotors, fainter this time, carried through the building from some muted broadcast or passing aircraft. The sound brushed the edge of her awareness like a hand on the back of her neck. Her eyes opened. She pushed away from the wall, straightened the hem of her scrub top, and reached for a box of gloves. A moment later, she opened the door and stepped back into the flow of the emergency department, the supply room light flicking off behind her. The hallway received her without noticing. Claire slipped back into the current of movement, past a tech wheeling a portable X-ray, past a resident struggling with his stethoscope. The noise wrapped itself around her again, familiar and busy. Trauma Bay 3 was quieter now. The curtain had been pulled half closed, leaving a wedge of view. As she walked by, she caught a glimpse of the man she had pressed back from the edge. He lay on his side, oxygen cannula under his nose, a nurse adjusting his blankets. The monitor over his head showed a gentle green rhythm, irregular but present. His eyes were closed. His chest rose and fell. For a moment, she let her gaze rest there. Then she moved on. At the nurse's station, Jenna sat with her elbows on the counter and a chart open in front of her. She looked up when Claire approached. Something cloudy flickered behind her expression, then smoothed out. "You are assigned to room 8 now," Jenna said. "Headache and high blood pressure. Chart is on the left." There was no joke attached to it. No nickname, just information. Claire nodded. "Got it." She took the chart and glanced over the notes, grateful for something that looked normal. Vitals, complaints, medication list, numbers behaved. They were like knots. You could work through them if you stayed patient. The floor vibrated under her feet. It was subtle at first, a low shiver that ran through the soles of her shoes. She frowned and set the chart down, fingers still pressed to the top sheet. A pen rolled slowly across the counter, as if testing the tilt of the world. Jenna looked up. "Did you feel that?" The vibration came again, stronger this time. Ceiling tiles trembled. A stack of plastic cups by the coffee maker rattled together. Someone down the hall said, "Is that construction?" Another voice answered, "In Seattle, we do not have earthquakes, right?" The monitor alarms did not change, but the air seemed to tighten. A respiratory therapist stuck her head out of a bay, eyes flicking toward the ceiling. The sound reached them a second later, a deep, heavy thudding that lived more in bone than in ear. It rolled over the roof and into the building, a slow, repetitive chop that made the light fixtures sway. Claire's spine went stiff. The noise settled against an old familiarity, one that vibrated through her ribs and into the back of her skull. Not construction, not an earthquake. Rotor wash. Her throat went dry. The room around her faded in and out of focus. For an instant, she was looking at a different ceiling, one stained with dust and smoke, hearing the same dull hammering from above while sand blew sideways in the dark. "Security to the roof," the intercom barked. "Security to the roof. Incoming aircraft." The next tremor knocked a clipboard off the corner of the desk. It hit the floor with a sharp slap. Papers fanned out. Dr. Klein stepped out from triage, brows pulled together. "What is going on?" A ward clerk answered without taking her eyes off her computer screen. "Dispatch says we have a helicopter landing," she said. "Air medical, I think." "This is heavier than life flight," one of the techs said, glancing up at the ceiling. "Feels like it is going to come through the roof." The sound swelled, filled the hall, then seemed to settle as the aircraft must have touched down. The windows at the far end of the corridor shivered in their frames. The fire doors at the main entrance flew open. Wind pushed into the ER, dragging a breath of outside air with it, damp colder carrying the scent of asphalt and jet fuel. A gust chased loose forms down the hall like startled birds. 2 security officers appeared first, hustling sideways to clear a path. Behind them came a cluster of men in uniforms that did not belong to the hospital. They wore army green, darker than the scrub tops around them, with patches on their shoulders and tactical vests locked tight over their chests. Their boots were wet, leaving a trail of prints on the tile. Rain clung to their sleeves. Protective gear hung from their belts. The one at the front moved with the kind of urgency that did not flail. Every step fell hard and precise. "Excuse me," he called, voice carrying over the hum of the monitors. "We need the charge nurse." Jenna straightened on the stool so fast it wobbled. "That is me," she said, because for the moment it was. The soldier stopped at the station. He was younger than Claire expected, somewhere in his 30s, with dark hair cropped close and a scar that cut through his right eyebrow. His name tape read, Lee. "Sergeant Marcus Lee's 2nd Battalion Rangers," he said. Jenna blinked, then nodded as if that meant as much to her as any other introduction. "We are a civilian hospital," she said. "What is happening?" "We have an inbound critical on our bird," Lee said. His voice stayed steady, but there was an urgency under it that pulled at the space between words. "He is a ranger captain, chest wound, unstable. He asked for one of your staff by name." Jenna's pen clicked once, twice. "Which doctor?" Lee shook his head. "Not a doctor," he said. "A specialist, a medic." He looked down at the crumpled paper in his hand, glanced back up. "We are looking for Specialist Claire Monroe, combat medic, United States Army, goes by Doc Monroe." The world took a small step to the side. For a second, no one spoke. The sounds of the ER kept going, but they seemed farther away, as if coming through a wall. The clerk frowned at her computer. "We do have a Monroe," she said. "Registered Nurse Emergency Department." Several heads turned at once. Claire felt their eyes hit her in sequence. She was aware of every one of them, aware of the way Jenna's gaze flicked from her badge to her face and back. Lee followed the direction of their looks, his attention landing on the quiet woman just beyond the desk. White tennis shoes. Standard blue scrubs hair in a knot, hands at her sides. "You," he said. The word was not loud. It did not need to be. He stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said. "Specialist Claire Monroe." Her mouth went dry. "I am a nurse," she said. It was an answer, not quite a denial. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I can see that. I also have your name, rank, and MOS on record." He lifted the paper. Monroe Claire A., former combat medic attached to 2nd Battalion. Last known station overseas. Discharged 4 years ago. Each piece of history dropped into the open space like a stone. Jenna stared at Claire. "You were in the army," she said, as if that detail had personally insulted her. Claire kept her eyes on Lee. "Who told you I was here?" she asked. "Captain Noah Blake," Lee said. The name hit harder than any tremor. The floor under her feet steadied and vanished in the same instant. Images flashed in her mind, sharp and unwelcome, a younger face smeared with dust, a crooked grin under a helmet, a voice over a radio saying her call sign instead of her name. "He is here," her voice came out thin. "He is on our helicopter," Lee said. "He took a close-range hit to the chest during a training exercise. The medic on board kept him alive long enough to get to your roof, but his pressure is dropping. He told us if we landed at a hospital in Seattle, we would find Doc Monroe working in the ER. "That is absurd," Jenna said. "She is new. She is on probation. She cannot just run off to play soldier again." Lee turned to her. "With respect, ma'am, he is not asking for a play. He is asking for the medic who saved his life once before." The room tilted again, this time only for Claire. Her heart hammered against her ribs too fast. "I am not that person anymore," she said. The words were so soft, she almost did not hear them herself. Lee heard, his jaw clenched. "Ma'am, all I know is this," he said. "My captain is losing blood by the minute up there. He said there is only one medic he trusts to pull him out of this. He described you. He gave me your name, this department, this city. He said if you were still alive, you would understand what that means." The buzzing lights above them hummed on. Somewhere behind Claire, a patient coughed. A printer started a new strip of labels. Dr. Klein stepped forward, voice edged with a professional calm that did not quite mask his unease. "Sergeant, we have trauma surgeons who can take over this case," he said. "If you bring your captain down, we can stabilize him. Nurse Monroe is not credentialed as a physician. She is a civilian nurse now, and I respect that," Lee said. "But he's not stable enough for a leisurely handoff. He needs someone who can work in the back of that bird right now with what we have. Someone who already knows how he responds, who understands the damage he has taken before." The words hung there. Claire could feel every pair of eyes in the immediate radius, sticking to her skin. Curiosity? Surprise? A flicker of something like betrayal on Jenna's face, as though Claire had kept a secret out of spite. Her hands found the edge of the counter. The laminate was cool under her fingers. Her mind split along 2 paths. One led back to the supply room, to charts to a headache in room 8, to small problems measured in milligrams and millimeters that rarely called out her name. The other led up toward the roof, toward the heavy sound still echoing in the bones of the building. Toward a man who had once said in a quiet moment that if he ever went down for good, he hoped it would be somewhere she was not around to see. Her gaze drifted past Lee's shoulder to the far end of the hall. The stairwell door waited there, a metal rectangle with a small wired glass window. Behind it, she could almost see the dim concrete, the narrow steps leading up into the noise. She let go of the counter, saying, "How many people are on that helicopter?" she asked. "Pilot, crew chief, 1 medic, the captain," Lee said. "The medic is young. He is good, but he is out of his depth with this one." "Supplies," she said. "Standard field kit," he said. "Needles, chest, seals, 1 chest tube, limited blood." She nodded once. "Is he conscious?" "On and off, Lee said. "He keeps asking if we have found you yet." The fluorescent fixtures buzzed overhead. The monitors kept their mechanical songs. On the TV in the break room, still playing to no one, a helicopter spun slow in a loop of footage from some other place. Claire drew in a breath that hurt its way into her lungs and exhaled carefully. "Show me the way, sisters," she said. Jenna stepped forward, words rising in her throat. "Claire, you cannot just go," she said. "You have patients assigned, you have orders, you cannot vanish on your 3rd day." Claire looked at her. For the first time since she had started at Cascade, she did not look away. "I will be back," she said. "If anyone asks where I went, tell them I went to take care of a patient." Her voice was not hard, but it did not leave room for argument. Dr. Klein hesitated, then gave a short nod that felt like a quiet surrender. "Lee," he said, "you bring her back in 1 piece." "That is the plan, sir," Lee said. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the far door. Claire started walking. Each step felt both heavier and more familiar than it should have. Staff parted around her as if moved by an invisible current. At the end of the hall, she reached for the stairwell handle. The metal was cool and slightly slippery from the damp air. She closed her fingers around it. For a heartbeat, she stayed there, caught between the hum of the ER and the pulsing thud from above. Then she pulled the door open and stepped through. The stairwell air tasted different. Cooler, staler, It smelled like old paint and metal and the faint, sour trace of mop water that never quite left concrete. The door clicked shut behind Claire, shutting out the layered noise of the ER. The sounds outside flattened to a distant murmur. Inside the stairwell, there were only footsteps. Her shoes made soft slaps on the steps. Behind her, Sergeant Lee's boots hit harder, a measured cadence that bounced off the walls. The thin strip of window at each landing showed nothing but gray sky pressing close. Her hand slid along the rail. The metal felt slick under a thin film of dust. Halfway up, Lee spoke breath steady. "You good, ma'am?" The question meant something different between soldiers than it did in a hospital. It did not ask about feelings. It asked whether you were going to freeze. She kept her eyes on the next landing. "I am walking," she said. "Fair enough," he replied. They climbed. On the next turn, the sound from above grew clearer. The rotors were no longer vague thudding. They resolved into individual chops, the rhythm quick and insistent. Air pressed down the stairwell in faint gusts carrying the burn of jet fuel and steel. For a moment, another stairwell overlaid this one in her mind. Hot instead of cool. Dust grinding between her teeth. The stairwell of an unfinished building, chunks of concrete, missing near the ceiling, bullets chewing the edges. Incoming, incoming, get away from the windows. Her boot caught the edge of a step. She corrected without thinking. At the top of the flight, a door marked "Roof" waited. The handle was a bar metal worn shiny in the center from hundreds of hands. Lee moved ahead of her and shoved it open with his shoulder. Noise hit them like weather. The world outside was a storm of wind and motion. The rotor wash flattened their scrubs against their bodies and grabbed at loose fabric. Paper skittered across the gravel and vanished off the side of the building. The sky was low and wet, Seattle's gray layered with the darker spinning blur of blades. The helicopter crouched in the center of the rooftop tail, angled toward the city, nose pointed at nothing. Its running lights blinked red and white. The side door stood open, a slice of dim interior, lit by the cold day. Rangers formed a loose half circle around it, keeping clear of the rotor arc. Their uniforms were damp from the drizzle, shoulders hunched against the fight of the wind. One of them held a hand up toward Claire and Lee signaled for heads down. Lee leaned close to her ear, his words torn at by the air. "Stay low," he said. "Follow me." She nodded and ducked. The rush of air grabbed at her hair, pulling strands from the knot at her neck. The rooftop surface felt gritty under her shoes. They crossed the open space in a crouching run. The city spread out beyond the edge of the building, a blur of glass and concrete and wet streets, but Claire did not look at it. Her focus narrowed to the open door of the helicopter and the dark rectangle inside. The smell intensified as they reached it. Jet fuel, hot metal, blood. A crew chief reached out and caught the side of Lee's vest, steadying him as he stepped up into the cabin. Lee turned and held a hand down to Claire. She ignored it. Her own hand caught the frame of the door. She pulled herself up in one smooth movement, knees clearing the lip of the opening. For a moment she had to fight the instinct to duck even lower, as if expecting incoming fire. Old habits twitched in her muscles. The inside of the bird was cramped and bright. Overhead lights cast everyone in a harsh, colorless wash. The noise here was even louder, a physical thing that lived in the chest. On the port side, strapped to a metal litter, Captain Noah Blake lay half-propped on a bundle of blankets. His uniform shirt had been cut away, chest wrapped in blood-soaked bandages that were no longer white. Tubes ran from his arms and chest to bags and machines. His skin was ashy lips edged in blue. Monitors were strapped to the wall above his head, their lines jagged and uneven. Numbers glowed in sickly colors. Blood pressure slid along the low end, dipping a little farther every few seconds. Beside him, a young medic fought with a piece of equipment, hands clumsy in bulky gloves. Sweat ran in a thin line down his temple, despite the chill. He looked up as Claire appeared in the doorway. His eyes were wide under the helmet straps. "Are you Doc Monroe?" he shouted. The title landed in the space inside the helicopter, like it belonged there, as if it had just been waiting for someone to speak it out loud. Claire stepped fully in and crouched beside the litter, bracing herself against the sway of the aircraft. "Yes," she said. The medic blew out a breath of visible relief. "Private Theo Brooks," he said. "He is crashing, ma'am." She let her gaze move efficiently over Noah. Entry wound high on the right side of the chest, just below the clavicle. Bandages soaked through, dark and sticky, the way his ribs barely lifted under the wrap. The slight bulge and stillness on one side of his chest, each detail slotted into place. "How long since he was hit?" she asked. 28 minutes, Theo said. "Training range live fire went wrong. I sealed the entry and exit with occlusive dressings, started fluids, tried a needle decompression, but pressure came back. Vitals now," she said. Theo rattled them off, numbers that sounded more like a slow fade than a stable line. Claire placed her fingers lightly against Noah's neck just above the carotid pulse point. A faint flutter beat answered, too soft, too fast. Noah, she said. His eyelids twitched. For a second, she saw nothing behind them. Then a pale green glance slid over and found her face. Claire, he whispered. Her name rode the vibration of the aircraft and somehow reached her intact. He tried to smile. It broke into a wince halfway. Knew they would drag you up. Looks like you did not give them much choice, she said. Her voice sounded almost calm in her own ears. Inside, everything she had been holding shut for years had cracked at the sight of him on that litter, but she pushed the feeling aside. There was no room for it here. She peeled back the edge of the bloody bandage. Fresh red oozed out around the soaked gauze. Each breath he managed to pull in made a small bubble form near the wound. Air going where it should not. The right side of his chest rose less than the left. Trachea shift, he asked. Theo hesitated, then reached to feel along the base of Noah's throat. A little deviation, he said. To the left. Claire nodded. The world narrowed even more. Tension, pneumothorax, she said. Right side. Possibly hemothorax as well. We fix what we can here. She looked at Theo. Do you have a 14-gauge needle and chest decompression kit? Yes, ma'am, he said, already turning to the supply compartment. And a marker, she said. I want to see what I am cutting. He handed her a black marker and a plastic wrap needle. She uncapped the marker with her teeth, the taste of ink familiar and bitter. With her free hand, she felt along Noah's ribs, counting quietly. Second intercostal space at the mid-clavicular line. A tiny pocket between ribs where air could be let out of a chest trying to suffocate itself. She circled a small dot on his skin. Noah, she said. You know what I am about to do? Party trick, he murmured. Your favorite. The corner of her mouth twitched. It did not become a smile. Hold him as still as you can, she told Theo and the soldier on the other side of the litter. If I hit the wrong spot, we have a different problem. She ripped the needle kit open and took out the long catheter. The helicopter shifted under them as air currents rolled over the roof. She waited for the motion to steady, then braced her wrist against Noah's ribs. Big breath in if you can, she said. He tried. The attempt was ragged. Claire drove the needle in. The skin resisted, then gave. There was a fraction of a second with nothing. Then a rush of air burst out of the catheter with a loud hiss. It sounded like the building had exhaled. Noah gasped. His chest lifted more evenly. The monitor beep shifted tempo, still fast, but not as frantic. Theo stared, his pupils huge. Holy, he said, then caught himself. Sorry, ma'am. Check his pressure, she said. Theo fumbled with the cuff, then called out numbers. They were not good, but they were better than they had been. We have a window, she said, but it will not last. He is still bleeding into that chest. We need to slow it down. She pressed new gauze against the wound, her fingers pushing hard, trying to clamp against a vessel she could not see. Warmth spread through the pads of her gloves. Any more blood on board? She asked. One more unit, Theo said. We were saving it. Hang it now, she said. Wide open. He moved fast, spiking the bag and opening the roller clamp. Dark red slid down the line toward Noah's arm. A voice cut through the noise, close and commanding. How is he? A man in captain's bars had stepped into the doorway, holding on to the frame. His face was lined, eyes as sharp with worry that did not spill over into panic. His name tape read, Hayes. He took in the scene in one sweep, the needle in Noah's chest, the blood on Claire's gloves, Theo's frantic movements. He was circling the drain, Theo shouted. She pulled him back. Hayes focused on Claire. You are Doc Monroe, he said. Right now, I am the only one keeping your captain's lung from collapsing again, she said. If you want to help keep this bird as steady as you can while we transfer. He gave a quick nod. We have clearance to move him inside, he said. Stretcher is ready just past the door. Claire pressed once more on the bandage, then secured it with fresh tape, wrapping it tight. All right, she said. On my count, we keep his chest level and his lines clear. The needle stays in until someone in a clean room with better tools tells me otherwise. She caught Noah's eyes again for a brief second. You stay with me, she said. That is the plan, he whispered. They moved as a unit. The crew chief released the straps holding the litter in place. Theo took the head, another ranger grabbed the foot. Claire stayed at Noah's side, one hand on the chest, keeping pressure, the other guarding the lines and the needle. On three, she said. 1, 2, 3. They lifted. The shift from helicopter floor to rooftop was a jolt. Wind slammed into them again, louder than the alarms. The litter bobbed for a moment, steadied under their combined grip. Claire walked backward, eyes on Noah's face, trusting the others not to trip. The roof stretched out behind her in gray and gravel and puddles. The open door to the stairwell loomed closer. Every breath Noah took sounded wet and shallow. Every few steps she glanced at the portable monitor strapped to the side of the litter, confirming the faint bouncing line was still there. At the threshold, Lee appeared, holding the stairwell door wide. Elevator is waiting 1 floor down, he shouted. We cleared a path to ICU. Good, Claire said. They maneuvered the litter through the doorway, the frame narrowly missing Noah's boot. The stairwell swallowed them, muting the wind. The rotors faded to a dull echo overhead. In the compressed space of the stairs, their breathing sounded loud. The air was warmer here, holding the leftover heat of the building. The smell of blood and fuel still clung to the litter. As they descended to the landing where the elevator waited, Claire kept her hand on Noah's chest, feeling each rise and fall under her palm. His eyelids fluttered, his mouth moved. "What is it?" she said, leaning closer. "Thought," he whispered, voice thin and shredded, "you were a ghost." His breath hitched on a small laugh that turned into a cough. "Not yet," she said. "You are not rid of me that easily." The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime strangely delicate in the middle of all this. They rolled the litter in, the small space filled with Ranger's metal gauze and the persistent beep of the monitor that refused to flatten. Hayes stepped in last and pressed the button for the ICU floor. As the doors closed, shutting out the dim light of the stairwell, he looked at Claire with a gaze that held more than immediate concern. Something like calculation and old knowledge sat there unspoken. She kept her attention on Noah's face and the pulse under her fingers while the elevator carried them down into the hospital. The elevator car hummed as it rose, a small square of bright light and metal, carrying too much weight. Claire kept her hand on Noah's chest, feeling the stubborn rise and fall under the bandage. The needle still sat at the top of his ribcage, taped in place. Every beat under her palm felt borrowed. The monitor strapped to the side of the litter showed a narrow, trembling line. His blood pressure crawled upward in tiny increments. His oxygen saturation crept out of the danger zone by degrees. Theo watched the numbers with the intensity of someone willing them to move. "Still with us," he said, as much to himself as to anyone else. Noah opened his eyes again, the green dulled with pain and drugs. "Nice elevator," he whispered. "We could have waited for the scenic one," Claire answered. Her words came out more gently than she intended. His lips twitched. The door slid open on the ICU floor with a soft chime. Bright white light spilled into the car. A team was already waiting. Nurses in different colored scrubs stood alongside a respiratory therapist. A portable ventilator waited on standby. Dr. Klein was there too, hair even more disordered than before, surgical cap hanging from one hand as if he had not yet decided whether to put it on. He took in the scene from the hallway. The Rangers, the bloody dressings, the catheter in Noah's chest. Claire standing in the middle of it all, gloves stained to the wrist. "You were not long," he said, but the words sounded thin. "We did not have long," she replied. They began to move again, the litter rolling out of the elevator and into the bright hall. Fluorescent light flattened all color into soft shards. The smell shifted back to hospital smells, less fuel, more disinfectant. "Vitals," Klein said, falling into step beside her. Claire gave them to him without taking her eyes off Noah. "Right lung, decompressed, partial improvement in saturation," she added. "Suspected hemothorax and active bleed. He needs a full workup and a chest tube in a controlled room. I kept the needle in place. It is buying us time." Klein nodded, already thinking ahead. "We have a trauma surgeon scrubbed in," he said. "We cleared an operating room. I will call radiology on the way." They hit a small bump in the floor where one piece of tile met another. Noah grimaced, his fingers twitching toward the wound. "Easy," Claire said, her hand pressing more firmly. "Almost there." As they turned a corner, the herd of hospital staff parted in front of them. Faces lined the sides of the corridor. Nurses from other floors, techs, a respiratory therapist who had clearly left a treatment half finished. They stood back, flattening against the walls as the procession passed. Claire saw Jenna among them. Jenna's hands were empty. Her posture, usually loose and casual, was rigid. Her eyes dropped to the blood on Claire's scrubs, then to Noah's face, then back again. For a few seconds, their gazes met. There was no time for words, no space for explanations. Claire looked ahead again. "ICU Bay 3, a nurse called. They swung the litter into the room, backing it into the space where machines already waited. Monitors flickered to life as leads were switched over, tubing was traded, new bags were hung while old ones were unclipped. Claire stayed at the head of the bed, steadying Noah's head, while the respiratory therapist adjusted his oxygen and checked his airway. The portable monitor's lead gave way to the hospital unit's cable with a click. Klein finished a quick assessment, hands moving over Noah's abdomen, checking for other hidden injuries. "Prep for the operating room," he said. "Notify Dr. Harrow that the patient is here and still alive thanks to a very stubborn nurse." He glanced at Claire as he said it. There was a quick flash of something like rueful admiration in his eyes. "We cannot wheel him in there without imaging," an ICU nurse said. "We need at least a quick film." "We do not have time for a full scan," Claire said. She kept her tone level, not challenging but firm. "He is still bleeding in that chest. Every minute we delay, we lose more volume." Klein exhaled through his nose, thinking. "Portable chest film at the bedside," he said. "Now, tell radiology if they want this man alive, they bring the machine here." The nurse snapped out of her hesitation and darted out of the room. As the team moved around the bed, attaching monitors and adjusting machines, Claire slowly eased her hand off the pressure dressing. The bandage swelled slightly, but did not immediately saturate. Theo hovered at the foot of the bed, looking misplaced among the civilians, his helmet under his arm. "Sir," he said to Claire, catching himself. "Ma'am, do you need me?" His cheeks were flushed. His eyes shone with leftover adrenaline. "You did good," she said. "Stay with your unit. Let the staff take it from here." He nodded, swallowing. "Yes, ma'am." Hayes appeared at her elbow. Somehow he had made it through the chaos without raising his voice or his pulse. He looked at Noah for a long moment. "That is as close as I want to see him to the other side for a while," he said quietly. Claire did not answer. Her throat felt tight. The portable X-ray team arrived with their machine, the bulky frame squeaking as they pushed it through the door. Staff rearranged themselves to make space. Klein turned to Claire. "We have it from here," he said. There was no dismissal in his tone, more a suggestion. She looked at Noah one more time. His eyes were closed now, lashes dark against his skin. The monitor above him beeped in a stubborn pattern. For the first time since she had stepped into the helicopter, she allowed herself to step back. She peeled off her gloves, fingers sticky inside the latex. The air against her bare skin felt too cool. In the hallway away from the brightest of the light and the crush of bodies, the sound dropped by a fraction. The world felt larger again, no longer confined to the few inches around Noah's chest. Hayes followed her out and let the ICU door swing nearly shut behind them. Through the narrow glass pane, she could still see a sliver of the bed and the blur of people moving. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Monroe," Hayes said at last. She faced him. Up close, he looked older than his rank suggested. A network of fine lines gathered at the corners of his eyes, carved there by years of sun and squinting and too much watching. His posture still held the straight-backed stance of a man who had learned long ago not to show strain. "Thank you," he said. The words were simple. They landed heavier than she expected. "You flew him here," she said. "Your medic bought him time. You do not owe me thanks." He tilted his head slightly. "I am not talking about favors owed," he said. "I am talking about results. He walked into that training range with me this morning. I did not expect him to be carried out of it upright. You increase the chances that I will fly him home again someday." She did not quite know what to do with that. He shifted, glancing down the hallway to make sure they were alone, then back to her. "There is something you need to hear," he said. Her chest tightened in a different way. "Is this about the live fire?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Training ranges do not just decide to start letting real bullets through," she said. "Not by accident." His eyes sharpened. "You know that," he said. It was not a question. She remembered the flicker of the wound. Clean entry, clean exit, precise path. Not the ugly, chaotic trauma of stray fire. "The round that hit him was not a stray," Hayes said. His voice dropped a half step, enough that anyone passing by would hear only a murmur. He was targeted. Claire's fingers brushed against the seam of her scrub pants, needing some kind of anchor. "By who?" "We picked up radio traffic in the area," Hayes said. "Short burst, encrypted, then cut off. Before the signal vanished, we got a handle. Single shooter, former contractor, ex-military. He has been off the grid for years." Every word sounded like it had already been vetted and cleared. "No more, no less. You have a name," she said. He hesitated for the first time. "Elias Ward," he said. The hallway seemed to narrow. Heat flared behind her ribs, not the hot edge of anger, but the shock of recognition. Another face rose unbidden in her mind. A grin full of sand and trouble, hands rough with calluses passing her a bottle of warm water in a makeshift outpost. A voice joking on the radio using her call sign instead of her rank. "Elias is dead," she said. The words came out flat. "That is what the report from your last operation said," Hayes replied. "Killed in action during an ambush, body unrecovered." He held her eyes. "Reports can be wrong." Her pulse hammered in her ears. For a moment she felt the heat again, the choking dust, the way night in the desert could be both freezing and suffocating at once. Operation Cinderwolf. The name floated between them without being spoken. She knew he was thinking it too. "He was with our platoon," she said quietly. "He dragged 2 men out of a kill zone with shrapnel in his leg. The last time I saw him, he was on the ground and the air was full of noise." Hayes nodded a small movement. "Intel believes he walked away from that ambush," he said. "Walked into the smoke and never came back to base. Since then, he has made a living where the lines are blurred. Private security, black contracts, nothing with his real name on it, but his signature is there if you know what to look for." Claire absorbed that in silence. "Why Noah?" she asked at last. Hayes lowered his voice even further. "Because of what he was looking into," he said. "He has been digging into Cinderwolf for the last year. Off hours, no official blessing. Requesting transcripts, tracking calls, talking to anyone who was there. He did not trust what was in the reports. A distant monitor alarm beeped, then stopped. A cart rattled by at the far end of the hall. He found something, Hayes went on. Fragments, redacted logs. Enough to know that what happened to your unit was not just a mistake. Her hand tightened at her side. He thinks your platoon was left exposed deliberately, Hayes said. Delayed extraction, changed priorities, all wrapped up in pretty language and buried under layers of classification. Images slammed into her again. The crackle of the radio, her own voice fraying as she called for evac, the silence that answered. Then finally, much later, a voice that sounded bored, telling them the bird was diverted to another mission. We were told there was a communication failure, she said. Hayes nodded slowly. That is one story, he said. Noah found another. Bits and pieces hinted at orders from further up. Orders that focused on how the situation would look on certain reports, not how it would feel on the ground. He looked at her in a way that said he knew how those words would land. Optics are hus, he said. That is the word that keeps showing up in the scraps he managed to find. Optics were unfavorable. Her mouth tasted bitter. So someone decided it was better for us to stay in that valley than to be seen getting pulled out of it, she said. That is what it appears, he said. She leaned back against the cool painted wall. For a moment she closed her eyes. Raw memory pushed at the back of them. How does Ward fit in? She asked. Hayes drew in a breath. Noah thinks Elias found out first, he said. That he discovered the same threads years ago, but followed them with a different idea of what justice looks like. So he started hunting the people involved, Claire said. People on both sides, Hayes said. Commanders, contractors, anyone connected to the operation and its cover. Some died quietly, some in ways that looked like accidents. Now Noah takes a bullet on a range where there should not be live rounds. Silence stretched between them. And me, she said. The question came out before she could decide whether she wanted the answer. Hayes studied her. Until today, Ward thought you were dead, he said. Your file lists you as killed in action during Cinderwolf. Noah told me he has been sitting with that mistake for years. There was a flicker of something in his eyes that might have been regret. When he realized you were alive, he wanted to find you before someone else did, Hayes said. Someone else. Elias Ward. So now he knows, she said. Now he knows, Hayes agreed. He saw what happened on that roof. He has eyes. Word spreads fast, even in closed rooms. Claire opened her eyes again and looked through the glass at Noah. He was a blur of movement, and pale-skinned staff clustered around him. The life she had built in Seattle, the quiet routine, the small rituals, all felt suddenly fragile. Thin paper laid over a landscape of rock and broken glass. You tried to disappear, Hayes said, not unkindly. Yes, she said. It worked for a while, he said. You picked a good place. Hospitals keep people busy looking at other pain. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh, though there was no humor in it. But someone opened the old files, he said. Someone started counting survivors. And I am on that list, she said. He did not say yes. He did not have to. Footsteps approached. One of the ICU nurses stopped beside them. They are taking him to the operating room now, she said. Dr. Harrow wants the hall clear. Hayes nodded. We will get out of your way, Bull, he said. The nurse hurried back inside. Through the glass, Claire watched as they unlocked the bed and began to roll Noah out monitors, following lines swaying gently. She stepped aside, giving them space as they passed. For a brief moment, as the bed moved through the doorway, Noah's face turned fractionally in her direction. His eyes were closed, but she still heard his earlier words in her head. Thought you were a ghost. Hayes touched her sleeve lightly. We will post men at the entrances, he said. You focus on what you do in there. Let us handle the rest. She nodded, though she was no longer sure there was any clear line between inside and outside. The doors of the operating suite swung open for Noah and his entourage, then eased back into place the small rectangular windows, swallowing him out of sight. The hallway felt bigger and smaller at the same time. Claire stood there for another moment, the echo of rotors still humming somewhere deep in her bones, and tried to steady her breathing in a world where the past had just stepped neatly into the present. The hallway slowly remembered how to breathe. The ICU doors had swallowed Noah and his entourage, leaving behind only the fading echo of wheels on tile and the faint chemical smell of prep solution. The muted beeping from other rooms crept back into focus. A cleaning cart rattled somewhere down the corridor, its plastic bin knocking softly against the handle with each bump. Claire drew in another breath, this one a little less ragged, and pushed herself away from the wall. Her gloves were gone, but the memory of blood clung to her fingers. She rubbed her thumbs against her fingertips as if she could press the sensation back into the past. She turned and started toward the small waiting alcove outside the operating suite. It was nothing more than a cluster of plastic chairs under a too-bright light, accompanied by an old magazine rack and a vending machine that hummed with ancient effort. She chose the chair closest to the wall, the one with the view of the double doors, to surgery. The clock above them ticked with a shallow, indifferent sound. The second hand swept. It kept sweeping. Time stretched. The adrenaline that had carried her through the rooftop and the elevator began to drain, leaving behind a hollow ache. Her shoulders sagged. She rolled them back, feeling each knot of tension shift reluctantly. Footsteps approached. The sound was light but purposeful. Jenna appeared at the edge of her vision, hands twisting together. She had changed her scrub top for a clean one. A faint smear of something dark lingered near her collarbone, as if she had missed a spot while washing up. For once, there was no smirk on her face. "Hey," Jenna said. The word hung awkwardly between them, too casual for the fluorescent pool of the waiting area. Claire looked up. "Hi." Jenna glanced at the OR doors, then at Claire, then back down at her own hands. "They said the guy from the roof is in there," she said. "The captain." "Yes," Claire said. "I saw you bring him through," Jenna went on. "You were—" She trailed off, searching for a word that fit what she had seen. Somehow nurse did not seem to cover it anymore. Claire waited. There was something almost gentle in her stillness. Jenna blew out a breath. "Look," she said. "About this morning. About how I have been since you started." A small, humorless smile flickered over her lips and died. "I did not know," she said. "I did not know who you were, what you had done." Claire studied her for a moment. "You did not ask," she said. It came out without heat, just a statement of fact. Jenna flinched slightly as if the words had more edge than Claire had meant. "That is fair," she said after a moment. "I just saw a quiet new nurse and figured you were going to faint at the first nosebleed." She tried for a crooked grin. It did not quite land. "Turns out you have more time on the pointy end than the rest of us combined," Jenna added. Claire looked down at her hands. "It was not exactly on the brochure," she said. Silence settled between them. Not the thick, suffocating silence of a battlefield, but a different kind. Hesitant. Unfamiliar. "I'm not great at this," Jenna said. "The apologizing thing, but I am glad you were here. For him. For that code blue earlier." She blew out through her nose. "And I guess I am saying I was wrong." Claire considered that. Her instinct was to shrug it off to minimize to make it easier. Instead, she let the words land where they fell. "Thank you," she said lightly, "for saying it." Jenna nodded relief flickering across her features, then back toward the nurse's station. "If you need anything," she said, gesturing vaguely at the vending machine. "The water fountain, the whole hospital, just—" "I will let you know," Claire said. Jenna turned away, shoulders a little less tense than when she had come. Claire leaned back in the chair. The plastic was cold against her shoulder blades. She closed her eyes for a moment. Behind her eyelids, the hospital ceiling gave way to another roof, another sky. This one had no clouds, only smoke and stars. The rotor noise there had been sharper edges, serrated by incoming rounds. The air had smelled of cordite and hot metal and burned fabric. "Doc, we have to move." "We do not have air yet, Mandy." "We do not have time." She forced her eyes open again. The clock had advanced exactly 3 minutes. The murmur of voices near the nurse's station drew her attention. The tone was different now, pitched lower, threaded with a tight caution. Rangers were moving through the ICU corridor. 2 of them took up positions near the stairwell door. Another pair stood by the elevator scanning everyone who stepped off. Their hands stayed away from their weapons, but only just. Their eyes missed nothing. Sergeant Lee spoke quietly with the hospital administrator, gesturing toward the main entrance on his clipboard map. The administrator nodded too quickly, his smile too wide. Hayes stood a little apart, watching the arrangement without interfering. Every now and then, his gaze slid to the OR doors, then back to his men. The hospital, a place built to accept anyone who walked in, started to grow invisible boundaries. Claire watched this with a strange, split feeling. Part of her welcomed the presence of trained eyes on the doors. Another part bristled at the reminder that the building was now more than a hospital. It was a point on someone's map. A shadow passed in the corner of her vision. She turned. Theo approached helmet, off hair, flattened in a sweat ring where the pads had pressed. He held a paper coffee cup in both hands, fingers wrapped tight around it. "Ma'am," he said. He still could not bring himself to say her first name, even in a civilian corridor. "Private." He glanced down at the empty chair next to her, then at her face. "May I sit?" he asked. "Of course," she said. He dropped into the seat with a small exhale that sounded like it had been bottled up for hours. The coffee in his hands sloshed, leaving a dark ring on the white lid. "They told me to take a break," he said. "Hydrate, eat something. Rest, all the usual." "And did you?" she asked. He made a face. "I drank half this and stared at the wall in the family lounge," he said. Decided that was not helping. His foot tapped against the floor, a restless staccato. "You did good work up there," Claire said. "Most medics freeze the first time they see someone they know in that condition." "You did not." He shook his head. I froze plenty, he said. My brain was trying to climb out of my ears. My hands just did not listen. That is the best you can hope for, she said. Hands that remember when your head is screaming. He gave a short, breathy laugh. Is that what it was like for you? He asked. She thought about answering with something light, a deflection. Instead, she let honesty skim the surface. Sometimes, she said. Sometimes my hands were the only part of me in the room. Theo stared at his coffee. Do you ever stop seeing it? He asked. When you were back home, when you were supposed to be normal. The word sat strangely in his mouth. Claire followed the sweep of the second hand on the clock. It gets quieter, she said. Not gone, just less loud, most days. He nodded, digesting that answer. Do you think the captain will make it? He asked. She did not answer right away. She thought of Noah on the litter, the hiss of released air, the way the monitor had steadied under her hand. He made it this far, she said. That is more than I thought I would ever see. Theo accepted that, though it was not a promise. A moment later, Hayes appeared in front of them. Brooks, he said, take your break where you can watch the stairwell. Lee needs you on the next shift rotation. Yes, sir, Theo said, standing. He looked at Claire, his expression tight but steadier. Thank you, he said quietly. She nodded once. He moved away, joining the knot of rangers near the stairwell door, coffee still in hand. Hayes shifted his attention to Claire. They told me you refused to leave the floor, he said. I did not feel like going home in the middle of all this, she said. Home still exists, he said, whether you are standing here or there. She did not argue. The truth of that statement was too tangled to pull at. Any word from the operating room? She asked. Not yet, he said. No news is usually better than sudden news. They stood side by side in silence for a few moments, watching the slow choreography of the ICU. A monitor beeped in a room down the hall. A nurse silenced it and adjusted a drip. A respiratory therapist wheeled a ventilator past its tubing, coiled neatly on top. The clock hand clicked forward again. A security guard hurried up the corridor from the direction of the main elevators. His uniform shirt was slightly damp at the collar, as if he had just come in from outside. He stopped in front of Hayes, breathing a little faster than normal. Captain, the guard said. His badge read, A. Rivera. You said to report anything unusual? Yes, Hayes said. What have you got? There's a man standing just outside the main entrance, Rivera said. Under the awning by the drop-off lane. He has been there for about 20 minutes. He has not come in, just standing, watching. Hayes's posture sharpened. Describe him, he said. Rivera hesitated, mentally replaying. Medium height, he said. Broad shoulders, but not huge. Beard maybe a few days' worth, dark with some gray in it. Dark jacket, jeans, no umbrella. He is soaked, but he doesn't seem to care. Is he armed? Hayes asked. Not that we can see, Rivera said. Hands are at his sides, not in his pockets. Stance looks. He trailed off, searching for a word. Like someone who has been told to stand still for long periods, Claire said quietly. Both men looked at her. Rivera nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. Military, that is the word I was looking for. He holds himself like my cousin did when he came back from Afghanistan. Hayes's eyes narrowed. Did you approach him? He said. One of our guys did, Rivera replied. Asked if he needed anything. The guy did not answer. He just looked at him once, then looked up at the building, at this floor. Rivera glanced up at the ICU windows as he said it. He was not looking at the lobby, he added. He tracked the line of the windows until he hit the ones marked ICU. Then he just stared, and he smiled. The word hung in the air. Claire's heart stuttered. Heat drained from her face, leaving a chill. Hayes caught the change in her expression. What is it? He asked. She swallowed. The hallway swam for a moment, then steadied. Did he limp? She asked Rivera. At all, on one side. Rivera frowned, thinking. Yeah, he said after a second. Right leg. Subtle, but it was there. Like he heard it a long time ago and got used to working around it. The concrete stairwell of that half-finished building flashed behind Claire's eyes. The explosion, the scream. Elias Ward dragging two men by their collars, his right leg dragging a fraction slower than the left, each step a small war. Her hand closed around the arm of the chair to keep from reaching for a weapon she no longer carried. That limp, she said softly. He got it the night we lost half the platoon. Hayes's jaw tightened. So you think it is him, he said. She did not have to say the name. It vibrated between them anyway. Elias Ward. Claire lifted her eyes to the end of the corridor where the sign for the ICU pointed back the way they had come, and beyond that to where the lobby and the glass doors and the world outside waited. Her pulse thudded in her ears in a rhythm that had nothing to do with the monitors around her. He knows I am here, she said. The words fit into the humming air of the hospital like a new, unwelcome sound. For a moment, no one moved. The quiet in the ICU corridor felt unnatural, like a pause in a sentence that should have continued. The monitors kept up their indifferent songs. The clock over the waiting area ticked on. Hayes was the first to break the stillness. Rivera, he said. Keep eyes on him. Do not approach again. Tell your people the same." The security guard nodded relief and tension warring in his face. "Yes, sir," he said. Then he corrected himself. "Yes, Captain." He turned and hurried back the way he had come, shoes squeaking lightly on the polished floor. Hayes looked at Claire. "If it is Ward, we do not engage him in the lobby with civilians around," he said. "We move people away from the entrance. We set a perimeter. We call for backup." He was speaking as much to himself as to her, running through a checklist that had kept men alive for years. Claire heard the words. She understood them. Her gaze drifted to the sign that pointed toward the elevators, and beyond them the main lobby. She pictured the glass doors, the overhang, the rain. She pictured Elias Ward standing under it, looking up at this floor and smiling. The idea of him out there watching like he had every right to be part of the landscape tightened something inside her. It was the same feeling she had when a patient was crashing and people wanted to talk instead of act. A slow, rising pressure that made it hard to stay still. "I am going down," she said. Hayes shook his head at once. "No," he said. "He is armed even if we cannot see it. He is trained. He has chosen that spot for a reason. We do not hand him the one person he is most interested in by sending you straight into his line of sight. If he wanted to shoot into the building, he would have done it already," she said. "He is waiting. For me. All the more reason to keep you here," Hayes said. Claire turned fully to face him. "If you wall me off up here, he is not going to walk away," she said. "He will stay there, or he will find another angle, a different entrance, a different target. You will chase his shadow while this place fills up with fear." "He is one man," Hayes said. "And that makes him fast," she said. "You know how he thinks. I know how he thinks. He picked the front entrance because he wants me to see him. He wants me to step through those doors and remember every time I followed him into a bad place." Her hands were steady at her sides, but she felt the pulse in her wrists, a quick drumbeat under the skin. "If I do not go to him, he will find another way to get to me," she said. "Or to Noah. Or to someone connected. You cannot fence him out forever." She held his gaze, letting him see that this was not adrenaline talking. It came from somewhere older. Hayes studied her. He looked at the rangers posted by the stairwell, the nurses drifting past the fragile calm of a floor that housed people hovering in the space between stable and not. "You go, you do not go alone," he said at last. She shook her head. "If he sees you flanking me, this becomes something else," she said. "A show, a standoff. He will lean into that. He wants an audience." She pictured Ward on patrol outside their old outpost, the way he would stand a little ahead of the group, drawing fire toward himself when they needed a decoy. "If he thinks it is just a conversation, he will talk," she said. He always liked to hear himself think out loud. "You are not a negotiator," Hayes said. "I am the one he is here for," she said. He exhaled slowly, the sound thin. "You step out of those doors, you stay in his line of sight," he said. "You keep your hands where my men can see them. If he reaches for a weapon, we take the shot. You are not a shield." "I am not," she agreed. Their eyes stayed locked for another heartbeat. Then he nodded once, short and hard, as if conceding to gravity. "Lee," he called. Sergeant Lee straightened from his spot by the stairs. "Sir." "Move 2 men to the side hall off the main lobby," Hayes said. "Tell them to stay inside the building. No one fires unless Ward goes for a weapon or tries to enter. I want intel more than I want a messy scene." "Yes, sir," Lee said. He was already moving radio clipped to his shoulder, crackling as he gave instructions. Hayes turned back to Claire. "You have 5 minutes," he said. "If you are not back by then, I am coming down with every uniform I can grab." "Understood," she said. He did not offer a hand. She did not expect one. She walked toward the elevators. Each step felt clearly defined heel, then ball contact, then release. The hospital floor under her feet was the same slick tile she had walked over all week, yet it felt more solid now, as if it had decided to reveal that it had been a foundation all along. The elevator doors slid open. She stepped inside and hit the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, the ICU world narrowed to a thin slice of light, then vanished. The car hummed and began to descend. The stainless steel walls of the elevator reflected her in fractured pieces. Her face in one panel, the blue of her scrubs in another, the smudge of dried blood on her sleeve in a third. She looked like several versions of herself overlaying one another. Army medic, rookie nurse, woman who had tried very hard to forget the first while learning how to do the second. Her hands hung at her sides. She looked at them. There were faint red stains along the edges of her cuticles that had not washed off yet. There was a time when scrubbing until her skin burned had been part of her nightly routine, as if friction alone could erase the memory of where those stains had come from. The elevator chimed and the doors opened. The lobby of Cascade Memorial was almost unrecognizable. The chairs where families had sat that morning were empty. The small coffee stand in the corner had its metal shutter pulled down. The volunteer's desk was unattended. A few visitors stood in uncertain clusters away from the entrance, clutching bags and jackets, casting nervous glances toward the glass doors. 2 rangers in uniform had taken positions near the walls, not obvious but unavoidable once you noticed them. Their eyes tracked everyone who crossed the marble floor. The overhead lights turned the lobby surface into a patchwork of reflections. The rain outside added its own shifting pattern to the glass. Claire walked across the empty space. The squeak of her shoes on the polished floor sounded louder than it should have. At the main doors, a security guard placed a hand on her arm. "Ma'am, you cannot go out there," he said. It was Rivera. He did not sound convinced even as he said it. "It is all right," she said. "He is here for me." Rivera swallowed. "That is what worries me," he said. His fingers loosened, then let go. She pushed the door open. Rain stepped in as if it had just been waiting for someone to invite it. The air outside was colder, the kind of thin, wet cold that seeped through fabric and found skin. The hospital awning caught most of the downpour, but mist still drifted under its softening edges. The drop-off lane was empty of cars. Beyond it, the city stretched in muted shapes, buildings smudged by weather. The distant sound of traffic was damped by the rain wrapped in a gray blanket. Elias Ward stood a few yards from the door, near one of the concrete pillars that held up the overhang. His hands hung open at his sides. His jacket was soaked through, darkened, almost black. Water dripped from the edge of his beard. He looked very similar and completely different. The last time she had seen him, his hair had been shorter, his face less lined. The eyes were the same, though, calm in a way that suggested the storm always lived somewhere else. He turned his head as she stepped out. For a heartbeat, there were 3 sounds: Rain, her own breathing, and the faint murmur of the lobby door easing shut behind her. "Claire Monroe," he said. Her name sounded soft in his mouth, muffled by the weather. There was something almost nostalgic in the way he said it, like someone tasting a favorite song from a long time ago. She stopped at a distance that felt right. Not close, not far. Her heart thudded once hard, then settled into a harsh, regular rhythm. "Elias," she said. They looked at each other across wet concrete. He took her in, head slightly tilted. Eyes moved from her badge to the hospital logo on her sleeve to the damp tendrils of hair at her neck. "A nurse," he said. "I heard rumors, but seeing it is something else." "You did not hear it from me," she said. He smiled, a small twist of his mouth that did not quite reach his eyes. "No," he said. "You did not invite me to your retirement party." Rain pattered on the canvas above them. Drops slid off the edge in long strings. "You shot Noah," she said. It was not an accusation so much as a statement that insisted on occupying the air between them. He did not flinch. "I did," he said. "On a training range," she said, "where rounds were supposed to be plastic, where you had to slip real ammunition into the script." "He was asking questions in the wrong rooms," Ward said. He had a way of showing up where people were trying to forget what they had signed. "He asked questions because you were not supposed to die for optics," she said. The word left her mouth like a shard of glass. Ward's gaze sharpened. "So he told you," Ward said. "I saw enough to confirm it," she said. He nodded slow. "Then we can skip the part where I convince you that the stories you were fed are lies," he said. "Saves us time." He shifted his weight. The movement made the limp in his right leg more visible. It had become part of him, not a flaw, but an adjustment. "Do you remember the radio that night?" he asked. "In the valley." Rain filled a brief pause. The memory did not need an invitation. "Yes," she said. "Do you remember what you sounded like?" he asked. She did. "Desperate," she said. "Alive," he said. "Too alive. That was the problem. You kept calling for a bird that someone had already decided not to send." Her jaw tightened. "They told us comms were down," she said. "They were not down," he said. "They were quiet. There is a difference." He lifted his shoulders in a small shrug that sent a line of water running off his collar. "They sat there and they listened," he said. "They listened to you call in coordinates and casualty counts. They listened to rounds walking closer to the mic. They listened to men who trusted them start to understand that trust had been misplaced. They told us resources were limited," she said. "They said another unit was in worse shape." He looked at her, something like pity in his eyes. "They had your 8 names lined up against a chart and saw how bad it would look to pull you out in front of cameras that had just been told the operation was a clean sweep," he said. "They chose the story over the people in it." He let that sit there. "That is what Noah has been digging up," Ward said. "Not the whole thing, but pieces. Enough to make someone nervous. And you decided to handle that nervousness with a bullet," she said. He tilted his head again. "What would you have done?" he asked. "Trust the same system that wrote you off once already?" Her fingers flexed at her sides. "You went after officers," she said. "People who made those decisions. That is one kind of vengeance. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I understand the line you drew." He watched her calmly. "Then you went after Noah," she said. "Someone on our side of the radio. Someone who stayed in that valley with us." He tried to thread a needle between truth and loyalty, Ward said. That needle does not exist. Every time he knocked on a door, he gave the people behind it a chance to cover their tracks. The longer he played detective, the more time they had to erase what you bled for. So you shot him, she said. To help. Sarcasm edged the last word. I took him out of their game, Ward said. If he lived, he would live because he was strong enough, not because they allowed it as a courtesy. If he died, he would die as a soldier, not as a file someone quietly deleted. He said it with the conviction of a man who had built walls around his own logic. You did not aim for his head, she said. You aimed for his chest. He lifted one hand slightly palm up. I am not entirely heartless, he said. Maybe I wanted to see if you still existed. She did not let that sink in. You came here today to finish the job, Mom, she asked. To see if he survived, so you can try again? He shook his head. If I wanted him dead, I would have walked in with a different plan, he said. I came here because I knew you would be near him, and I wanted to see you understand what they did. He reached into his jacket slowly. Through the glass behind Claire, she caught a glimpse of movement. Shadows shifted just inside the lobby, Rangers adjusting their positions, tensing as his hand disappeared into the coat. She did not turn. She kept her gaze on his face. Ward's fingers emerged, holding something flat and folded. Not a gun. Not a knife. Paper! He held it between two fingers away from his body, the way a man offers a truce or a charge sheet. What is that? She asked. The part Noah could not get, Ward said. The uncut transcript, command channel, timestamps, orders. He lifted his chin toward the hospital. The night they left you, he said. Rain spotted the top sheet, dark dots blooming on the white. Why give it to me? She asked. Because you stitched people back together under lies, he said. You deserve to see the cut as it really was. He took a step closer, slow, watching her, making sure she saw that his hands were still empty of anything but paper. Claire closed the distance the rest of the way. The air between them seemed thicker, too full of rain and history. She reached out and took the folded pages. They were damp and heavier than they should have been. The moment her fingers closed around them, shapes moved behind the glass. The lobby doors flew wide. Rangers poured out boots loud on the wet concrete. Rivera and another security officer followed, faces taut. Several weapons came up, not quite aimed but ready. Mr. Ward, Hayes called. His voice was clipped but controlled. Do not move. Ward smiled without teeth. There it is, he said softly. The part where the uniforms remember their job. He lifted his hands, palms outward, fingers spread. The rain ran down his forearms and dripped from his cuffs. I am not armed, he said to Hayes, not today. Hayes approached, keeping a careful distance, his own weapon holstered, but his hand near it. You are under military custody, Hayes said. You know why. I imagine the list is long, Ward said. A ranger stepped in behind him and took hold of his wrists, pulling them gently back. Metal cuffs clicked around bone. Ward did not resist. His eyes stayed on Claire. I did not come to kill you, Claire, he said. Not you. The words fell between them with a strange gentleness. You came to break me some other way, she said. I came so you would not spend another year thinking the worst thing that happened in that valley was your fault, he said. Now you have proof that it belonged to someone else. He leaned in slightly as they began to walk him toward the waiting vehicles at the edge of the drop-off lane. They will try to tell you this is classified, he said, just loud enough for her to hear. They will tell you to hand those pages over for the good of something bigger. Decide for yourself what that something is. Then he straightened, let the rangers guide him away. Claire stood under the awning, the rain whispering its constant line around her. The folded papers in her hand felt like a weight that did not match their size. Behind her, the doors to the hospital weighted glass slick with reflected light and weather. The lobby beyond was a blur of uniforms and nervous visitors. She looked down at her hand. Her fingers had tightened around the packet without her noticing. The edges had dug into her skin, leaving pale grooves. She eased her grip and drew a slow breath, the smell of wet concrete and exhaust filling her lungs. Then she turned toward the doors and walked back inside the papers, held carefully as if they carried something fragile that might cut her at the same time. The lobby felt warmer on the way back in, but Claire did not register the heat. Her attention had shrunk to the weight of the folded papers in her hand. Rainwater slid off the edge of her jacket and left a small trail on the marble floor. The visitors near the far wall watched her with unsure eyes, as if she were coming in from someplace they could not see. Hayes had followed her through the doors, but he did not stop her when she crossed the lobby. He spoke quietly with Rivera instead, gestures small and controlled. Claire headed for a side corridor that led away from the main flow of traffic. At the end of it, near a bank of vending machines, a short row of chairs sat mostly empty. A framed print of a mountain lake hung crookedly on the wall, one corner lower than the others. She lowered herself into the seat beneath it and placed the papers on her lap. Up close they looked ordinary. White sheets, black print, a few smudges where the ink had blurred. The top page was damp at the edges from the rain. Her fingers hesitated on the fold for a heartbeat. Then she opened it. Lines of text stared back at her. Timestamps marched down the left margin, neat columns of numbers. Beside them, call signs and abbreviated labels. Command, air, ground. Each line was a fragment of a conversation. She began to read. 2014-23 Zulu ground unit, Cinderwolf to command, taking small arms fire, request immediate extraction. Her throat tightened. She heard her own voice under those words. Not as it sounded now, quieter, older, but younger, hoarser. Scraping out of a dry mouth into a radio that smelled of metal and sweat. Cinderwolf to command, we have multiple casualties. Say again, we need air now. 20-40 Zulu command to Cinderwolf. Copy, stand by. Stand by. On the page, the words were clean. On that night, they had come through a burst of static, followed by silence that stretched too long. Her eyes moved down the sheet. 20-16-01 Zulu ground unit Cinderwolf to command. Enemy fire increasing. LZ compromised. Request confirmation of exfil. 2016-15 Zulu command internal discussing. The next line was indented. Different label. 20-16. 20 Zulu command. 1 to command. 2 extraction for Cinderwolf will play poorly on current media narrative. Optics unfavorable. There it was. The word looked small on the paper, 4 syllables, all edges and soft middle like something harmless. On the page, it sat there quietly, an administrative term. In her memory, it echoed with the sound of rounds hitting too close, and someone screaming as shrapnel found bone. She heard the voices again, layered over one another, the men around her shouting over the gunfire, the medic she had been trying to count breaths, pulses, rounds all at once, the command channel cutting in and out, each reply spaced just far enough apart to let panic grow. She kept reading. 20-16-35 Zulu command, 2 to command. 1 alternative assets available for priority theater. Suggest delay extract until situation more favorable publicly. 20-49 Zulu command, 3 agreed. Delay extraction until further notice. 2017-02 Zulu command to Cinderwolf comms intermittent. Attempt to hold position. Extraction pending. Her vision blurred for a second. She blinked hard until the text sharpened again. Pending. A word that had meant, we are trying when she heard it. Here on paper after optics unfavorable, it meant something else. It meant you are on your own until we can figure out how to make your survival useful. Her jaw clenched. She forced herself to read on. The log went on for pages. Cinderwolf calling in casualty updates. Command replying with delays. Redirections, references to other units and other needs. Between those internal notes that had never been meant to leave the room where they were spoken. Monitor situation. Do not divert air from current operation. High-value targets in theater. Small unit loss acceptable. Her stomach turned. Acceptable. She read until the lines began to swim together. The times marched on each minute she remembered now, backed up by a timestamp and a decision. 20-39-54 Zulu Cinderwolf, we are out of ammunition. 20-40-03 Zulu command internal media blackout in effect for sector. Risk of exposure reduced. Extraction now feasible. Feasible. After 25 minutes of standby, her mind split present and past overlapping. She felt the weight of a body under her hands again. Sergeant Rivera from that night, not the guard downstairs. His face gray in the darkness, blood sticky under her palms, her voice on the radio hoarse and breaking. If you do not send that bird, they will die. On the page, someone had answered with copy, dispatching now. Not because the situation had changed on the ground, but because someone had looked at a grid of risk and decided the columns finally lined up. A slow tremor started in her hands. The paper rustled. She tightened her grip until the edges cut lightly into her fingers. Somewhere in the lobby, a child laughed briefly, then fell quiet when a parent shushed them. The vending machine beside her continued its low, steady hum, indifferent to whatever anyone was reading under its fluorescent glow. Claire pressed the heel of her free hand against her thigh, needing something to push against. For years, she had replayed that night with one assumption that she had failed. Failed to evacuate the wounded fast enough. Failed to make the right triage decisions. Failed to keep the unit together as the world collapsed around them. She had carried that failure in the quiet parts of herself, in the way she flinched at sudden noise, in the way she sometimes woke in the dark with the taste of dust in her mouth. The pages in her hand rewrote none of what had happened in the valley. They did not instantly erase the dead or the decisions she had made. They did not turn bullets into blank rounds. They altered something else. They shifted the weight of intent. The worst thing that happened that night had not been born in the dirt under their boots. It had been born in a clean room somewhere far away under good lighting with coffee on the table. Optics unfavorable. The words sat in her mind like a stone dropped into water. The ripples spread outward, touching every memory, changing the way it refracted. Her throat burned. She realized she was breathing too fast and forced herself to slow down. In through the nose, out through the mouth. It felt like a drill she had taught to panicked patients. Footsteps approached. She heard them without lifting her head. Soft soles, no heavy tread. Hesitant. "Ma'am." Theo Brooks. His voice had that same mix of respect and uncertainty. She closed the file with more care than she felt and looked up. Theo stood a few feet away, helmet clipped to his belt now. His hair still held the flattened marks from the pads. He held his hands together in front of him as if not sure what to do with them. "Sorry," he said. "I did not mean to interrupt." "You are not interrupting," she said. He glanced at the stack of papers on her lap, curiosity flickering, then politely dropped his eyes. "Captain Blake is out of surgery," he said. The words hit her like a sudden change in altitude. "How is he?" she asked. "Critical but stable," Theo said, repeating the phrase exactly as he had heard it. "That is what the surgeon told us. They fixed the main bleed. Lung is reinflating. They will keep him sedated for a while." He shifted his weight. "He woke up once," Theo added. "Just for a second, right after they brought him into recovery." Claire's heart climbed into her throat. "And," she said, "he asked for you," Theo said. "The nurse said he tried to say your name, but the tube was still in. She said his eyes were open, and he looked around like he was trying to find you." Theo looked at her, as if afraid he had overstepped by passing this on. "She asked me if she should come get you," he continued. "I told her I would." The vending machine hummed. The clock above the hallway door ticked once. Claire slid the papers into a neat stack. The top sheet still showed the line about optics. She folded it over carefully, as if putting a lid on something hot. "Where is he now?" she asked. "Recovery room near the OR," Theo said. "They said only 1 or 2 visitors at a time. I think they will make an exception for you." His mouth twitched in something like a nervous half-smile. She stood. Her legs felt tight from sitting, but they held. "Thank you," she said. Theo stepped back to give her space. "Ma'am," he said, then hesitated again. "Whatever's in those papers, I am sorry you had to see it that way." She looked down at the folded stack in her hand. "I am not," she said. "I would rather look at an ugly truth than keep making peace with a lie." It came out calm, as if she were talking about a clinical diagnosis, not the shape of her own past. Theo nodded, accepting that. "I will be outside if you need anything," he said. He moved away back toward the thicker presence of rangers near the lobby entrance. Claire took one more breath in the quiet end of the corridor, feeling the weight of the pages, the weight of years. The strange, bare feeling of having something heavy shifted off her, even as it still pressed down. Then she turned toward the surgery wing and began to walk the sound of her own footsteps, the only thing she let herself focus on while the rest of the day rearranged itself around what she now knew. The hallway to the recovery unit was quieter than the rest of the hospital, as if sound itself walked softer there. Claire passed a series of closed doors with small windows, each holding a glimpse of someone returning from the blurred edge of anesthesia. Nurses moved between them with a different rhythm, less hurried, more measured. At the end of the hall, the recovery desk rose like a small island of light. A nurse in pale green scrubs sat behind it, chart in hand. Her hair was tucked under a cap, and a pair of reading glasses perched low on her nose. She looked up as Claire approached. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I am looking for Captain Noah Blake," Claire said. "They just brought him out of surgery." Recognition flickered in the nurse's expression. "You are the one from the roof," she said. "The medic?" Claire hesitated for half a heartbeat. "Yes," she said. The nurse nodded as if that answered a question she had not dared to ask. "He is in Bay 4, she said, gesturing to the right. "We are limiting visitors, but the surgeon specifically said you were allowed in if you showed up." Her voice softened a little on the last part. "Thank you," Claire said. The nurse gave her a small, encouraging smile and went back to her chart. Claire followed the direction of the nod. Bay 4 sat behind a half wall, and a curtain pulled 3/4 of the way across. She pushed it gently aside. The room was dimmer than the hall. A single overhead light cast a soft circle of illumination around the bed. Machines lined the wall, their displays glowing in green and blue. The air smelled of antiseptic, warmed plastic, and the faint sharpness of cautery. Noah lay in the center of it all. The blood had been washed from his skin. A clean dressing wrapped his chest white against the bruised colors blooming beneath it. An oxygen mask covered his nose and mouth. Tubes and lines traced paths from his arms to bags hanging on poles, clear liquids, dripping in measured drops. His eyes were closed. A few strands of hair clung damply to his forehead. The monitor above him showed a rhythm that was no longer frantic, just tired. Claire stepped closer. Her shoes made almost no sound on the polished floor. She stopped at the side of the bed and rested her hand lightly on the rail. Up close, she could see the small tremors of effort in his breathing. The kind of work a chest does when it has been cut open, patched, and asked to keep going. A movement in the doorway drew her eye. Dr. Harrow, the trauma surgeon, appeared with a clipboard under one arm and a disposable cap, still crumpled in one hand. His surgical mask hung at his neck, leaving his face marked by the faint grooves of elastic. "You must be Monroe," he said. "Claire," she said. "Claire," he repeated, nodding once. "Harrow." He glanced at Noah, then back at her. "He is a stubborn one," Harrow said. "Good thing considering what was going on inside that chest." "How bad was it?" she asked. Harrow shifted his weight. "Entry wound tore through the upper lobe of the right lung and nicked an arterial branch," he said. "He was bleeding into the chest cavity. We evacuated the blood, repaired the vessel, placed a tube. The lung is reinflating. He lost a lot of volume, but he had just enough left to give us something to work with." He tilted his head. "Whoever put that needle in his chest on the roof bought him the extra minutes we needed," he said. "Without it, he would not have made it through the door." Claire looked back at Noah. "Good," she said. Harrow followed her gaze. "He is not out of the woods, he said, but he is on the path. We will keep him sedated for a while, give his body a chance to catch up." He hesitated, then added, "He will drift in and out. When he does, keep him calm, less strain on that repair." She nodded. "I can do that," she said. Harrow gave her a thoughtful look, as if weighing the scope of "can" in her mouth, then turned to go. "If you need anything, hit the call button," he said. "Otherwise, let him rest." The curtain whispered as he left. Claire pulled the small plastic chair closer to the bed and sat. The vinyl seat sighed under her weight. She placed the folded stack of papers on the small bedside stand away from the drip lines and the monitor cables. Their presence there felt dangerous, but she could not bring herself to leave them elsewhere. For a few minutes, she simply watched Noah breathe. The mask fogged slightly with each exhale. The chest tube pulsed a small movement in its length with each breath. The monitor beeped in slow, steady intervals that set a pace for the room. Her shoulders eased down by degrees. The tension in her jaw loosened. She let herself feel the simple fact that he was here and not a name carved into a marker somewhere under a foreign sky. Noah stirred. It was small, a flicker of motion under his eyelids, a shift of fingers against the blanket. Then his lashes parted and the green of his eyes surfaced through the haze. They wandered for a moment, unfocused, then found her. He tried to speak. The mask muffled the attempt, turning it into a rough exhale. She leaned closer. "Do not try too hard," she said. "You have stitches in places that do not like surprises." He blinked slowly, as if that was a joke he was willing to concede. "Hey," he managed. The word was barely a sound, more breath than voice. "Hey," she said. His gaze flicked to the stack of papers on the table, then back to her. "You read it," he said. It was not a question. "I did," she said. Something in his face tightened, old worry surfacing briefly. "Sorry," he whispered. "You already lived it once." She exhaled. "I was already living it on a loop," she said. "At least now I know whose loop it really was." His eyes watched her, searching for damage. "You carried it," he said, "all this time." "You did too," she said. He shifted slightly, winced, settled. "I carried different pieces," he said. "You carried the screaming part." Silence settled between them, but it felt different from the ones they had been given before. It did not press down. It simply sat there, waiting. "I thought you were dead," he said quietly, "after Cinderwolf." "I know," she said. "I saw the report." He frowned, faintly confused. "How?" he asked. "They wrote it for me too," she said. "I was listed as killed in action, administrative error that no one rushed to correct." His brow smoothed as the implication sank in. "That is why Ward thought you were gone," he said. "He told me once that at least you got out clean." Her mouth twisted. "Clean is not the word I would use," she said. The oxygen mask hissed softly. The machines went on recording. "I replayed that night for years," she said. "Every step, every choice, who I dragged and who I left. I thought if I had done one thing differently, one more person would have walked out." Her eyes stayed on his, but her gaze tipped inward. "I heard your voice on the ground," she continued. "You told me to go. You said you were fine. You were not. I still went." "It was my job to say that," he said. "You know that." "It was my job to decide if I believed you," she said. "And I did. I let myself believe you because I did not have room for another guilt in that moment." He closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again. "You pulled me as far as you could," he said. "I remember every inch of that drag. I remember how your hands shook when you tried to get another line in. I remember you pushing your own fear into some corner so you could keep your voice steady on the radio." His mouth curled slightly. "I also remember thinking that if anyone made it out, it would be you," he said. "So when they told me you were dead, the world lost its shape for a while." She swallowed. "They kept the bird away because of optics," she said. "Not because they could not come, because it would have looked bad if they did." He gave a small nod. "I suspected," he said. "I needed proof." "You found it," she said, glancing at the stack of pages. "Not all of it was out," he said. Ward filled in the gaps his way. They let that name hang there without chasing it. "I have been angry for so long," she admitted. The words felt like they had been stored for years and were finally finding space. "At myself, at you, at the radio. I did not know where to put any of it." A faint line appeared between his brows. "At me?" he asked. She met his eyes. "You told me to go," she said. "I left with that in my ears. I hated you for making it easier." His expression softened into something like regret and understanding. "That is fair," he said. "I hated me for the same thing. I sat with the image of your back disappearing into the smoke and thought if she gets out, I have to make sure this was not for nothing." He let out a slow breath. "That is why I started digging," he said. "Not because I wanted revenge, because I needed to know if we were unlucky or used." Her gaze dropped to his hand on the blanket. The skin there was pale knuckles nicked with old scars. She reached out and laid her fingers over his. His hand was warm and heavier than it looked. For a moment he did not respond. Then his fingers curled around hers, grip weak but deliberate. The monitors kept their steady beeping. Outside the bay, a cart rolled past wheels, squeaking slightly. The hospital went on. "You did not fail us," he said. "You kept more people alive than we had any right to expect. None of what is in those pages cancels that." "I do not know how to stop feeling like I did," she said. "You do not," he said. His voice was almost a whisper, but the words were clear. "It does not disappear, it just gets shared." He tightened his grip around her hand as much as his strength allowed. "You carried it alone," he said. "That was the part that was wrong." She felt something inside her chest crack. Not in a breaking way, but in the way ice on a river cracks in spring, making room for movement. Her throat burned. She did not fight it. She bowed her head slightly, letting her hair fall forward and let a few tears slide down. They landed on the back of his hand, warm spots on warm skin. He did not pull away. "You are not alone in this, Claire," he said. "You have not been for a long time. You just did not let yourself see it." She exhaled the breath, shaking its way out. "You are not alone either," she said. "Not anymore." They sat like that hand in hand while the machines traced their lines and the recovery room held its quiet. The buzzing in her head that had been constant for years faded a notch. The night in the valley did not vanish. It never would. But it shifted slightly, no longer a weight she had to balance alone on her shoulders. In the reflection of the monitor screen, she caught a glimpse of them both. A tired woman in scrubs and a wounded captain on a hospital bed, connected by more than lines and tubes. She let the sight sit without pushing it away. Outside the bay, the hospital's intercom chimed softly, announcing some routine request. It sounded far off, a small sound, in a building that had just quietly rearranged the way it held two of its people. The day thinned around the edges. By the time Claire stepped out of the recovery bay, the clock in the hall had crawled past late afternoon. The light coming through the narrow windows had shifted from flat gray to something softer tinted with the idea of evening. Rangers still held quiet positions along the corridor. The cluster near the waiting area had thinned, some of them having rotated out, others called back to whatever came next on their orders. The ones who remained had loosened their shoulders by a careful fraction, but their eyes stayed sharp. Sergeant Lee stood with his back to the wall, near the nurse's station, talking in low tones to Hayes. When he saw Claire, he straightened slightly. "How is he?" Hayes asked. "Alive," Claire said, holding his own. The words felt better in her mouth than any clinical term. Hayes's shoulders dropped just enough to show he had been braced against the opposite outcome. "Good," he said quietly. "He will like hearing that you were the one who told me." She glanced down the hall toward the lobby. "And Ward?" she asked. "On his way to a place with thicker doors," Hayes said. "There will be hearings, investigations, people in uniforms sitting around tables. For now, he is not anywhere near this building." There was no triumph in his tone, just tired practicality. "Those pages he gave you," he added. "They are yours, but they are also going to be very interesting to a lot of people." "I know," she said. "If you decide to hand them over, choose carefully who you give them to," he said. "Some hands are better than others." She thought of the way Ward had said the word classified, like it was just another shape of silence. She thought of Noah dragging truth up by its roots in his spare time. "I will keep that in mind," she said. Hayes studied her for a moment longer. "You did not have to come up those stairs today," he said. "You did not have to walk out those doors." "I know," she said. He gave her a short nod, an acknowledgement of something that did not need to be put into words. "If you need anything from my side of the fence, you know how to reach me," he said. "For now, my men will get out of your hospital." He turned to Lee. "Pull the perimeter back," he said. "Thank the staff for putting up with us." "Yes, sir," Lee said. Rangers began to peel away from their positions, some heading toward the elevators, others toward the stairwell. The hospital corridors slowly regained their usual mix of scrubs and visitors and carts. Jenna appeared near the station, a clipboard tucked under one arm this time. There was a line between her brows, but it looked more like thought than annoyance. "Hey," she said to Claire. "I was just coming to find you." "Here I am," Claire said. Jenna huffed a faint laugh. "Administration wants to know if you're coming back on shift tonight," she said. "You are technically still on the schedule, but after—" She waved one hand toward the ceiling, the helipad the whole day. "They said to ask. I should probably not put in more charting while there is dried blood on my shoes," Claire said. "Reasonable," Jenna said. She hesitated. "They did say if you want to shift to trauma as your primary assignment, that is an option." Harrow put in a word. So did Klein. "People are suddenly very aware that you exist." Claire felt something flicker behind her ribs, not quite anxiety this time, something more like recognition. "I will think about it," she said. "Do that," Jenna said. "In the morning, after you sleep like a person who has earned it." She took a step back, then seemed to remember something. "Monroe," she added, "you know you do not have to be invisible here. You are allowed to take up a little space." The words were a little rough, but they landed gently. "I will practice," Claire said. Jenna rolled her eyes, but there was a small smile tucked in the corner of her mouth as she turned away. The overhead intercom crackled to life. This time it carried nothing urgent, just a routine call for a respiratory therapist to another floor. The chime at the end sounded almost light. Claire glanced through the window in Noah's bay one more time. He was asleep again, chest rising in slow, even lifts. The monitor cast a pale glow over his face. She stayed there long enough to feel that image settle somewhere steady inside her, then turned and headed for the staff locker room. The smell inside was familiar. Fabric softener deodorant, the faint rubber scent of shoe soles. The noise of the hospital beyond the door came through as a muffled blanket instead of sharp edges. She opened her locker. Her street clothes hung inside untouched since the morning. Above them on the small top shelf sat her bag. From a side pocket, she pulled out a small metal tag on a chain. Monroe Claire, A.O. Post Catholic. The letters were scarred from old scratches. The surface had dulled over time. She held it in her palm for a moment. In the mirror above the row of sinks, a woman in blue scrubs looked back at her. Hair pulled loose from its knot, dark circles under her eyes, a faint line around her mouth from hours of a mask. She lifted her hospital badge from her scrub top. The plastic rectangle swung from its clip. Claire Monroe, registered Nurse Emergency Department. She turned the dog tag once between her fingers, then slipped it behind the badge, tucking it so the metal rested flat against the plastic. The chain coiled neatly invisible behind the lanyard. Both names in the same place. She let the badge fall back against her chest. The sinks gleamed under the fluorescent lights. She turned one faucet on. Water rushed out cold at first, then warming. She rubbed her hands under it, watching the last faint trace of dried blood swirl away and vanish down the drain. The sound of running water filled the small space. She closed her eyes for a moment. In her mind, the roar of rotors rose. Not in panic this time, just as another note in the background of her life. A sound she knew that no longer had the power to yank her entirely back into the past. She shut the faucet off. Silence settled, soft and ordinary. Outside, the muted thrum of a helicopter drifted through the building. Not from the roof this time, but from farther away. Part of the city sky, not her roof. The hospital did not vibrate with it. No one shouted. No one ran for the stairs. Claire opened the locker again, grabbed her jacket, and shrugged it on. Before she closed the door, she slid the folded stack of papers onto the top shelf. They sat there between an extra pair of shoes and an old paperback. Close enough to reach, not sitting in her hands. She shut the locker. The metal door clicked into place. On her way out of the staff area, she passed a window that looked toward the helipad. The concrete up there was empty now, rainwater shimmering in shallow pools where boots had been hours before. The railings glistened, the city lights had begun to flicker on in the distance. A nurse pushing a supply cart smiled at her in passing. "Long day," the nurse said. "Yes," Claire said, "but a good one to finish breathing at the end of." The nurse nodded, not fully understanding, but sensing enough. Claire took the stairwell instead of the elevator. The air was cooler there, echoing the edges of the morning. Her footsteps sounded alone on the concrete, the rhythm steady. At the ground floor, she stepped out into the main lobby. The coffee stand had reopened. The volunteer's desk held a new shift of faces. A kid in a dinosaur hoodie swung his legs off the edge of a chair while his mother filled out paperwork. The world had slid back into its usual shape, with only a few traces of what the day had carried. Through the glass doors, the rain had thinned to a mist. The pavement outside gleamed. The spot under the awning where Ward had stood looked like any other patch of concrete, just wet. Claire walked to the doors and paused. For a moment, she watched the gray sky, the passing cars, the ordinary traffic of a Seattle evening. Behind her, somewhere in the upper floors, monitors beeped and staff moved, and Noah slept with a repaired chest and a handprint worth of warmth still pressed into his skin. She pushed the door open and stepped out into the soft rain. The air smelled of wet asphalt and distant pine. The city hummed around her, its own kind of rotor noise. She adjusted her jacket collar and began to walk each footstep solid on the sidewalk, each breath steady. Inside her pocket, her fingers found the edge of her badge, the cool outline of the hidden tag pressed against her palm for a moment. Metal and plastic together before she let her hand fall to her side again and kept going. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If the story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.